Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, who is diving into the fourth in our series on the 2020 NFL draft class for your Buffalo Bills. And tonight we are jumping into maybe one of the more surprising picks of the class with quarterback Jake Fromm from the University of Georgia. And who better to discuss that with than our man from the Cover One Draft Show and so many other places around the world, Russell Brown. Russ, how we doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's this is an interesting one, and I think it's one where in the post-draft presser, Brandon Beane tipped his hand a little bit in that he was working with an NFC team on trading up for a lineman, and that lineman went before they were able to consummate a deal, and that they didn't have any intentions of going quarterback in this draft. I think that Matt Barkley is a sufficient backup. I don't think he's a high-end backup. I don't think he's gonna, if Josh Allen gets hurt, I think this season's in trouble. I
Did
don't
you
know
just say
that.
Matt Barkley?
Yeah, he's technically the gentleman that we're gonna have to deal with, but being able to, if Josh Allen goes down, the season's done. And I don't think that changed with the pick of Jake
Yeah.
Fromm. Now, I will say I've heard some fans throw out Nathan Peterman 2.0, and I think that's unfair in that, I get the comparisons of,
hmm
good decision making, not an NFL caliber arm, a good locker room guy. But Peterman was a historic flame out, so I don't want to put that kind of energy on Jake Fromm here, but why don't we let you dive right in and tell the people what to expect with a guy like Jake Fromm?
Yeah, I caught some heat in the summer when I started my summer scouting and everything, and I watched Jake Fromm for the first time. And the game I had watched, his just ball placement was a little sporadic. I mean, guys were making some really good adjustments and kind of bailing him out of trouble. And I cannot remember for the life of me who number 15 is for their team, but he did that a hell of a lot this past year. I cannot remember his name, but he did it a lot this past season. And I mean, while the numbers show that he's pretty, accurate as far as the statistics show, he had a career completion percentage of 63.3%. He had just under 61 this past year. So, I mean, he's been fairly accurate over the course of his career. And, according to SIS, his on target percentage was 72.1. So he took, a pretty good step. I didn't look at his numbers for 2018 on that, but, he's fairly accurate with the football. So where we had some of those concerns with Josh Allen coming out, I don't think we'll have that concern here with Jake Fromm, but he doesn't have as big of an arm. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that you'll see with him is he's always calm. He's always poised. He's very collected, very cool in the situation and in the moment, whether he's on the sidelines, whether he's in the huddle, whether he's on the field. And he's smart. He does, I think, a pretty good job with pre-snap reads. I think there's times, though, that he rushes through those reads and he'll quickly call a play. And I even noticed that this past weekend. I was watching some more of DeAndre Swift and just getting a feel for that for the Lions' sake,
Yeah.
which I wrote about over at cover1.net. But yeah, with Fromm, I noticed there was times that he would go really fast, and the play clock should not have been down. So I think overall, though, I mean, good ball security. He only had 18 in his career. He had 5 this past year. And at 6'2", 219, I mean, he doesn't have a big hand. So if hand size is a thing, it's under 9 inches. So if you're worried about hand size, and it showed, I mean, it did show at the combine. He did not throw a pretty ball. He struggled, and that's why he fell where he did. And like you mentioned, he was a 5th-round pick 167. That's where he fell because he struggled at the combine in front of everybody, and he didn't have an opportunity at a pro day to really, I don't know, fix that and show that, hey, it was just an off day. So I think overall you're seeing probably a career backup guy. I don't know if the upside's going to be as high as a guy like a Josh Allen that you can develop into a starter. He might be a quality spot starter. I certainly think he's better than Nathan Peterman. So, and I liked Nate Peterman a lot when he came out, don't get me wrong, but I think Fromm is arguably way better than him.
Well, hey, that's a start. It's something where, I think that Josh Allen has talked about how the mesh with Matt Barkley and he in the quarterback room has
Hmm.
been better than what some fans would realize, because Matt Barkley's had to talk about how you compensate for not having a howitzer connected to your right shoulder, how you work on anticipation, how you measure, the steps for a receiver, and how when to get rid of the ball and what you're watching for with the safeties. And those are huge steps that Josh Allen's going to need to make to step forward if he's going to be able to make that progression that we're all looking for. And I think that's a similar skill set. When you hear people talk about Jake Fromm, I think he's one of the guys who was really crushed by this, um, obviously the very serious COVID disaster that's going on throughout the country. But as far as just from a draft prospect standpoint, he's one of those guys that if he had been able to be in the room with those GMs, those head coaches, those offensive coordinators, they got the leadership, the charisma, the poise, his intelligence, his football IQ on the whiteboard, being able to show what he did, and that was their last impression of him, and not throwing in between Jacob Eason and Justin Herbert at the combine, where, hey, here's a guy with a ridiculous arm. Oh, here's
Hmm.
Jake Fromm. Oh, hey, look, here's Justin Herbert. And every single drill, it was zip and then pew
Yeah,
and then zip.
exactly. Yep,
And
and
then
that's what it was too, and that's what it showed, and that's unfortunate because it was weird. He actually had some nice throws at Georgia. He put balls down the field, and he has a very natural release. It comes out of his hand relatively quick, as just far as like the throwing motion. But then he got into the NFL setting at the combine, and it just did not come out of his hand the right way, and it was odd. I mean, if we talk about guys that maybe fit like a quick passing game,
sure.
Justin Herbert would probably fit that. A lot of screens. He had 99 pass attempts this past year, same as Anthony Gordon, according to SIS, as far as screens. They threw 99 screens. Fromm only threw 40. So it wasn't like they had a bunch of design plays that really help boost that completion percentage. He was putting the ball down the field in tight windows and doing certain things. But I think ultimately what he struggled with was just getting through some of those reads and through those progressions downfield and staring a guy down. And then when he was faced with pressure, he just didn't have the athletic ability necessarily to get away as clean as he would like. And then he would just kind of throw a duck down the field. So I mean, I don't like him pushing the ball 70 yards down the field. It's not as accurate as or natural for him as a Josh Allen. But I think if you're talking, kind of 30, 40 yards, I think that's fairly easy for him to do. But he's going to manage a game, and he's going to help, I think, grow Josh Allen as a quarterback and have him understand pro style concepts and offenses. And that's what should be important here. So I think as far as fifth round goes, I think this is a pretty good pick as far as overall value. Maybe not exactly what everybody wants, but when you need a young quarterback to kind of help come in and push your young quarterback as well, this is something that you kind of got to do.
Yeah, and obviously, I spent a lot of time diving into the contract structure and roster construction side of the business, and that Matt Barkley's contract's up.
Hmm.
Backup quarterback market is expensive. Getting a guy on a 4-year deal below the minimum, it's the rookie contracts are even less than what you pay the veteran minimum nowadays. There's a significant financial incentive if he's able to be a legitimate backup. Now, I've been on the train that I think it's inevitable that at some point Andy Dalton is Josh Allen's backup. I feel it in my heart that that's that's gonna happen at some point here. And but I think if they're able to find that path where he's able to be that guy and they have some semblance of confidence, that I think it was Matthew Fairburn that was talking about it, where you know people have been telling Jake Fromm he's not going to be able to do this multiple times, and he beat out Eason, who now got drafted higher than him. He pushed Justin Fields to transfer. He's been able to win these jobs. I certainly, I live in Atlanta, for anybody who doesn't know that. So I'm surrounded by it, and I've been here for all of Jake Fromm's years. And prior to that, I was in Augusta, Georgia, and Aiken, South Carolina, in that area, with surrounded by a mix of South Carolina, Clemson, and Georgia. And I watched that freshman run by Fromm, and I watched the SEC championship game and the, you know, national championship semifinal and the national championship game. And,
Hmm.
you know, as far as I'm concerned, he won a national title. He's not the one who gave up that game winning score at the end. You know, in giving up what the defense did in overtime in that game. And at that point, I was in the position, I think I was with some of the guys that were Clemson fans, I think they were watching that game with. And I said, you know, I'll trade my next 2 first-round picks for that guy. I want that guy as my future quarterback. Um, and that, you know, I think people assumed there were 2 more material steps forward from him after that. And that was probably the peak, that initial run that he had there. And that, you know, at that point now in hindsight, you're figuring, oh, he was actually surrounded by, you know, Nick Chubb and Riley Ridley and Mecole Hardman and just constant NFL talent everywhere around him. And not that there wasn't, you know, he still had Swift and there was still talent in that Georgia team this year, but maybe not all of the receiving threats that he had in the previous years. And you
Yep.
saw his numbers took a step back because there weren't guys to do the work for him.
Yep, and I wrote about that because I wrote about him back in August, and I said that exact thing. And I said I would not be surprised if he takes a step back because he lost so many weapons. I mean, I think it was 5 or 6 guys he lost to
Yeah.
the draft or through the transfer window. And I said I think his progressions will take a step back because he was often rumored as a first round pick. And I mean, I thought it was still very early, but I said if he can make it work and he can get Georgia back into where, you know, back into the playoff, back into the SEC championship game, then he's only going to help himself. So ultimately, that does not happen. And just running through some numbers for people that, you know, want some of those, I guess, statistics or analytics. You know, 68 of his pass attempts were on curl routes this past year. He completed 53 of them. 16 of those pass attempts were on slant patterns, and only 10 of those were completed. And then 15 of them were out of, you know, thrown to flats. So, I mean, for a guy that didn't throw the ball a whole hell of a lot, only 384 pass attempts, I think it kind of goes to show that there are limitations with him. And obviously, Georgia's a run first offense. We know that. But that's something that is kind of promising, as we've talked about with guys like, you know, Zack Moss and Devin Singletary. You can protect him in that sense. So if he was needed to come in, if Josh takes a shot like he did this past year with the concussion and everything, and you need him to come in, that's kind of promising to know that he can, one, operate your offense with the, you know, the pro style offense, but beyond just that, he can use his running backs, and that's something he's familiar with. So there should be some comfortability there. So I like it from that sense, and hopefully, you know, by going from Georgia to the Bills, where he's got Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and John Brown, he's got a little bit more to work with than he did this past year.
Yeah, and I think that's got to be where anyone's expectation is. I think it would be in maybe a normal season where you had the rookie mini camp, where you had OTAs, where you had the opportunity to be in the building all throughout this lead up, and then a full training camp and a full preseason. I could see a path where the Bills could keep 2 quarterbacks and Jake Fromm
Mm-hmm.
could genuinely beat out Matt Barkley. Um, with everything going on here, and how I'm just praying that we get football, period.
Yeah.
I don't know what that path's going to be like. I know there's no rookie minicamp. I know there's no OTAs. I don't know what any semblance of training camp's going to look like when that time comes in late July, early August. And then I just hope that we get some form of football. I don't see a path where he's the lone guy here. I think that we do see Matt Barkley finish out his contract. I think that he probably moves on after that. I don't know that we bring him back. I think that into a second year, and hopefully, obviously, whatever our new normal is around the world, we get into more of a football normal in 2021. I think Fromm will be able to step forward there. I think that's when the decision comes is, are the Bills in a mode where you see some of these other teams now going after the Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, you know, option backup where, hey, if something goes down, we're still good here. We still
Mm-hmm.
have a, you know, and I think, you know, I believe strongly, I've made the case in some of our other pods. I think Brandon Beane has built the best other 52 in the NFL, or at worst, one of the top 4 or 5 with your Baltimore's, your San Francisco's,
Your
those
Saints and
kind of
stuff,
your
yeah.
Saints, those kind of rosters, that obviously that's a ton of pressure on Josh Allen. But the other 52 guys on this roster are going to be badass. These are going to
Mhm.
be some really talented guys. I don't want it to be that, Josh Allen, for all his all his warts and all the positives and upside, some of that upside is a bit reckless. Some of that upside is a very physical brand of football where, he's had injury scares each year that he's played. I don't want all of that to go down the tubes because we put all of our, hopes and wish into, a charismatic leader with a noodle arm, that's there. So I have some hope that Jake Fromm can be more than that. I understand he's beat odds multiple times. I do think he's more than Nathan Peterman 2.0. But I don't know that I expect much beyond a, hopefully, I'll say at the high end, a high level backup who can be a spot starter, and that your best case scenario is you can flip him as an asset in year 3
Mhm.
or 4. Um, but that also, in my mind, this doesn't take me out of the 2021 backup quarterback market. If they see another guy shake loose that is looking for that opportunity. So where do you see, from just a high level standpoint, do you think there's ceiling beyond there? Do you think there's a Chad Pennington potential for him at some point?
You said the name Chad. You're down the right path as far as the name Chad. I was thinking more so like a Chad Henne,
Okay.
just more of like a career backup. And Henne made a hell of a lot of money being a backup and just
Chase
being.
Daniel.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just about being one of the smarter guys in the room, and they'll get their opportunity to be a spot starter here and there. And hopefully, it's not through some big quarterback transition. It's more so just because of an injury or something that's not long term, for the sake of Josh Allen. But yeah, I mean, I don't view him more than just I think in my player profile on him, it was probably that first sentence on the overall projection, poised quarterback destined to be a backup for a few years. And I think it could be for his career. I mean, is there a chance? Absolutely. There's always a chance with anybody. So I'm never going to write anybody off, but just from what I've seen and just how it goes, I mean, so many guys come in, and quarterbacks especially, you only see one or two, maybe, that really pan out of a draft class. And sometimes you're lucky if you get that one or two. So I don't know if the Bills necessarily are going to get that with Fromm. I'm not going to write him off because, like you said, I mean, he can go up against the odds and he defeats it. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, I know off the field, he likes to duck hunt. So if you're a hunter, he's your guy. So we'll see what happens there. But I think it's just as far as adding a quarterback and some depth to the position and getting that knowledge for Josh, that was, I think, that the big part here. And I think that's going to be what benefits him the most. And hopefully it works out in the long run for Jake, just to be the backup and get a nice contract down the road.
It just come from a purely analytical standpoint on roster construction, asset allocation, picking value at the quarterback position when it falls in the draft is almost always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost never a scenario where that's not worthwhile. If you get a value, and I'll use this as the counterpoint to what Philadelphia did with Jalen Hurts, and where they picked him, and they're talking about, we're in the quarterback development business, and that's always an asset we want to have available. What are the odds they're going to ever flip Jalen Hurts for better than a second round pick?
They could.
That your best case scenario, that you're probably going to break even, that you're probably,
Yeah.
you're basically going to lease that asset for a couple years. And then your best case scenario is a Garoppolo type deal where you flip him for another second round pick.
Yeah.
Whereas, you look at Jake Fromm, if this pans out where he has that kind of preseason run and gets a little bit of buzz, and then you get one of those, week 7 injuries from Josh Allen where he comes in and leads, has a really strong roster around him and leads a touchdown drive and holds on to a game, and then has a nice start the following week while Josh recovers, and then a week 17 mop up duty where he looks good. and all of a sudden you get a couple of teams like, hey, you guys might be onto something here, and all of a sudden then you have a possibility of an actual return on investment where it's not unreasonable to say, oh, maybe you could flip him for a third or a fourth round pick where you're getting, more value from the fifth round pick where you got him. So at least from that standpoint, I could see that scenario where that comes up, where you're able to, heck, they got a fifth round pick for, oh, darn it, Alabama quarterback that they traded to the Raiders, AJ McCarron.
Yeah, there you go.
Heck, you got a fifth round pick for AJ McCarron. So, Brandon Beane's been able to pull bigger rabbits out of hats in the past, but I think it's an interesting story. I think picking quarterbacks at value is never a bad thing. So I'm open to that standpoint being a positive, and that I think most people are closer to where your evaluation was, that this is not some secret starter in waiting. There's no quarterback competition here. There's no scenario there, I guess, besides backup quarterback competition.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that at least it's worth taking a shot.
yeah, no, and I think that's a common theme in a lot of draft classes is, a lot of good teams end up taking a quarterback, it seems like every year.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in the first round, but on that third day, if you have 7, 8, 9, 10 picks to play with, take a quarterback and just try to add some value there. And maybe you get a diamond in the rough. And I mean, you look at what the Patriots were able to do. I mean, I know they had Tom Brady for so many years, but they went out and they got Jacoby Brissett in the third round, and you
Yeah.
saw that, and they moved him for Philip Dorsett, who ended up being, fairly good for them as far as being a special teamer, being a deep threat. And, if maybe you get into a jam in, let's say, 2 or 3 years where, we talked about this before with Isaiah Hodgins and stuff and everything else, like, you get into the position of, hey, we need a receiver down the line because Beasley's gone, Brown is gone. Well, maybe there's a team down the road, like let's say the Raiders, they need a quarterback and they like what they've seen from Jake Fromm. Okay, they go trade for Jake Fromm and they give you, I don't know, let's say Lynn Bowden or
Yeah.
whatever out of Kentucky down the road.
Done. I'm in.
So exactly. So, I mean, if you can turn that, I mean, you never know. So that's one way of viewing it. I never really thought of it until now. So I had to look up Brissett and see exactly what they got for him. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's a backup, but we'll see. I mean, you never know in the game of the NFL. But I mean, I like the pick. You can't go wrong with taking a quarterback. And I think he's an upgrade over Matt Barkley in the long run.
Yeah, again, I think that's a great way to look at it. And make sure you guys are checking out the Cover One Draft Show. Make sure you guys are finding, Russ on Twitter, Russ NFL Draft, and make sure that you're checking out everything that he's got going on. You can hear him on radios, podcasts, all over the airwaves here. Appreciate all your work with us tonight, Russ. It's been a lot of fun talking about the Bills' new quarterback addition, and probably the most surprising one out of this draft class.
Oh, yeah.
But still an interesting pick and a good value, and continued to show the willingness to do. I think this was the best example of staying true to your BPA philosophy, that if they're going to do that, this proved it out, that, Brandon Beane's a man of his word. He means it when he says he's going to take the best player available, and I think he did it here. So appreciate the insight. Looking forward to it. Appreciate you guys listening. This is Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.